Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
And Mr. Pyburn and Mr. Walters are not present. We do have a quorum. Now, if everyone would take a look at the minutes from last meeting. If anyone has any additions or corrections, let us know. Otherwise, we'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Wisnott, seconded by Mr. Langy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone here that would like to make public comment? Apparently not. There's apparently no public comment, so we'll move on to staff reports. Briefing from staff and discussion from the executive office.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Nick Voinas of TDLR, and want to thank you for being here and thank you for your service to the state. Here to bring you our executive office report, which is more or less a summary of what is happening around the agency. Since lawmakers have gone home, so to speak, after a busy 85th session and a special session earlier this year, TDLR staff's been busy preparing to implement legislation that was passed during that time. So what that means is, it's a total team effort around the agency as all TDLR divisions are involved in the process, which includes developing rules, communicating to stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards like this one, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. As for new programs, on September 1, TDLR picked up the state's podiatrists, and in 2 days, we had 6 more health-related programs from the Department of State Health Services, phase 2 of the 13 total programs that we were granted 2 years ago. So on November 1, we add code enforcement officers, laser hair removal, massage therapy, mold assessors and remediators, offender education programs, and sanitarians. Next September, we'll also pick up the state's behavior analysts. But I want to add that as we add these programs granted to us by the legislature, lawmakers have also deregulated 5 of our programs since 2003, and will deregulate 4 more over the next 2 years. So we recommended that action after our strategic planning process, which included public and industry feedback. The legislature agreed that the licensing requirement for those programs were unnecessary and burdensome, and with little or no risk to consumer protection. Also, over the last couple of months, TDLR staff has been working hard to help our licensees and small businesses recover from the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Texans helping Texans, as we call it. And the entire TDLR staff, in addition to our disaster recovery team, deserves mention for their efforts. In coordination with the governor's office and their Rebuild Texas efforts, we've been implementing procedures for all eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover and return to work as quickly as possible. Starting several days before Harvey hit the Texas coast, TDLR staff was extending license expiration dates, waiving late fees and license replacement fees, waiving CE requirements, and extended grace periods for expired licenses for those in affected areas. In summary, we worked hard to remove the burden of red tape to help Texans rebuild. Information on this and many other things can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov. And you can also go to the Texans Rebuild website as well to get the full picture on the Harvey recovery efforts. I'd like to take this time to promote our social media accounts. If you're into that, please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Keep up with TDLR news and events. But going back to our website for just a minute, I wanted to share some recent web traffic with you. associated with this program. Over the last 6 months, the Water Well Drillers website has had more than 29,700 page views. That's an average of 163 a day. And 60% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, while 34% did so from a smartphone and 5% from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting the site were, number one, laws and rules, followed by FAQs and well construction and plugging specifications, CE and exam information, and application and forms. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You have a question?
I do.
Yes, sir.
What are we doing about the contaminated wells after Harvey? I know there's recommendations how to disinfect them, but
We have linked to the.
David?
David, you want
Yeah.
to introduce yourself, come up?
And we just, Mary Winston, TDLR, we just want to make sure everybody can hear that's watching.
Dave Gunn, Program Manager of the Water Well Driller Pump Installer Program. We had a well disinfection guide up, but after the hurricane, we found that TCEQ's guide was more comprehensive, so we put it up there. It has more to do with what to do with your well after the flood. So we did put it linked to where our disinfection guide was before and used it as a source of information.
okay.
Any further questions?
How can we, David, how can we access that information?
It's on the website, on the Water Well
On our
Drillers
website,
page. It's in a big red block on top of the page that says anything to do with the flood and Harvey well disinfection guide. And we've been sending callers to there when they call. And hadn't got that many, but we've had a few.
Any other questions?
I would just say, given the circumstances, do we plan to look at our disinfecting and recommendations for this type such, make it more similar to the TCQ or correspondent with it?
Well, theirs was specific to the flooding. Our disinfection guide is more at large, overall. It's nothing wrong with it, but the way their guide goes, it starts off, I don't have it in front of me, but it starts off, if your well was flooded, what steps do you take? Ours just had the plain old disinfection guide. If you want to disinfect your well, use this many cups of bleach per this foot of standing water. Theirs was a little bit more specific to the flooded area. So that's why we linked to it for the temporary time. But then we'll go back to ours once all that's over.
My thought would be maybe if it was a little better coordinated, maybe somebody could go to either site and get similar information, so.
Well, they can. We just, right now, we have the link to the TCEQ one because of the way they have it worded for the flood specifically.
Thank you.
So any landowner can disinfect their own well, or?
It's always been like that.
Okay.
Landowner can do what he wants on his own property.
There's no further questions. Thank you, David. Compliance Division.
That's be me. David Gunn, Compliance Division. Wanted to give y'all an update on some things. Since we had meetings with the Alberto Jimenez attended and participated in the Groundwater Protection Committee Public Outreach Subcommittee on September the 13th. Also, on September 13th. Adam Foster attended and participated in the Groundwater Protection Committee Groundwater Issues Subcommittee. Then on the 18th, I attended the whole committee, and we discussed the public outreach and the current things going on with the committee and the public outreach and groundwater issues. Continuing education and training update on August 17th. Alberto conducted the requires laws and rules continuing education course at the Crockett County Groundwater Conservation District in Ozona. 20 licensees were in attendance. Update on field activities. Since the previous meeting, council meeting, Alberto conducted 8 compliance inspections, 1 lead, and 1 abandoned well. Now, this is due to a lot of time we spent here in the office. I'll get to it in a minute. David issued 19 variances, 10 in fiscal year 2017 and 9 in 2018. What we've been working on a lot here lately is exam development, because on November through the 7th through the 9th, we're going to meet with PSI and review the exams. So we wrote 113 more new questions for the exams that will be reviewed at that exam review. And that's the end of my report, unless you got some questions.
Any questions? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Education Examination Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman and board members. My name is Lorraine Schroff, and I'm with the Education and Examination Division. You should have in front of you our report, which was submitted. I just want to highlight a few items for you. The exam and CE statistics are provided in the report. As David just mentioned, there will be the Exam Development Committee on November 7th through 9th, and we have currently added to our subject matter experts, which will be helping in reviewing those exam questions. If anyone else would be interested in volunteering, we're always looking to add to that pool, and you can submit an application to become part of that group. Our main efforts of concentration lately have been, of course, Hurricane Harvey, and we've been helping with the schools that were affected in that area. And that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council members have questions?
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Enforcement Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ball and other advisory and council board members. My name is Kimberly Davenport, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division, here to give you our staff report today. First, regarding the case highlights, I believe you have about 3 cases summarized for you. All of these cases were the result of default orders where the respondent either didn't respond or didn't request a hearing, and default orders were entered against them. 2 of these were licensees. One of the defaults was actually against a landowner for a failure to cap or plug their well. It was a deteriorated well on their property, and they were assessed a $1,000 penalty. The first other default against a licensee involved their license being revoked, and that was for a failure to pay a previous order for a violation regarding a misrepresentation they made to a customer or landowner. The third highlighted case regarding a licensee, they were assessed a $2,000 penalty as a result of a default, and that was based on them failing to seal the annular space of a well. They also used the wrong casing, and they also failed to complete the well with the concrete slab at the surface. There's a hold on their license currently. None of the penalties have been paid in any of these default cases to date. Regarding the statistics, as you can see, the specific program is a very small percentage of the department's cases. However, when you look at the amount of penalties collected, it's over half of penalties are collected from the penalties that are assessed in this particular program. Do you have any questions regarding the case highlights or the statistics?
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Licensing Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. I'm Lisa Hodek with the Licensing Division. My report will be brief. I have presented you with the water well driller and pump installer licensees, license numbers from fiscal year 2013 to 2017. As you can see, they are increasing in number, and last fiscal year we've issued 102 new licenses. Our total population as of August is 1,761 for the drillers and installers. The apprentices, we have issued 253 new licenses last fiscal year, and total population is 409. And that pretty much concludes my report. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to tell, it seems to me like it's a pretty big increase. Is there a way to tell how many of those are out-of-state applicants?
No, I'm trying to think offhand if we have that capability. So I will look into that for you next time. I'm not 100% sure we have that in our system, but I will definitely look into it.
Okay,
I don't think it's very high, but I will look into it.
thank you.
Got a
Any-
question.
Uh-huh.
On the first column there where you have the water well driller and pump installers, is there a third category which would make up the total population?
I'm not,
For
The-
2017, for example, 1620 plus 102 is 1722, but the total population is 1761.
okay, the total population is basically a snapshot on that particular day. So that's going to vary each day. It could be if people renew or they don't renew, things like that. Does that make sense to you? So it's not necessarily a total of the two numbers on the top. It's just a snapshot at that particular time.
This is Mary Winston, TDLR. I want to remind the board to introduce yourselves, which I have failed to do. When asking a question or making a comment, we are airing live, but in case someone can't see, just your name tag. Please introduce yourselves. And we'll try to make that clearer. If it's not clear, I do see what you're saying. But we do the snapshot on any given day. So when we say new licenses issued on this given date, fiscal year 2017, renewed licenses issued, we could have someone in there that wasn't in that time frame for a renewal. So we may think of another way to capture it or just put a date specific to be more clear.
Does that help, sir? Okay.
Ray wasn't in. I was going to ask if you had any opinion on why these numbers have increased as dramatically as they have.
I do not. Of course, the apprentices, we weren't issuing them at that time, and so the higher number there, that was kind of expected. As far as the drillers, I do not. I'm not sure.
No, that's fine. I was just
Your guess would be
curious.
as good as mine. Anything else?
Thank you.
Do you have some?
Ray Reed, I have one more question. We have a total number of licenses issued. Is there a way to tell how many were applied, how many applicants there was?
I do not have that information handy, but I can look as well into that. And what I can do is I'll try to have that answer for you at the next board meeting. Will that help?
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Too fast based on how many intruders you see available in the market, you know. To me, anyway.
Discussion of and possible recommendations to proposed amendments, Texas Code.
Hi, good afternoon. Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel. Just an overview to make sure we're all working off the same page. Want to make sure that you just got a handout that starts out with the rule text 76.10, and if you'll double check where it says 76.100, let's see, D2, it should have as letter C, fiberglass casing. If you could check that, so we make sure we have the right materials. Are we all good? As you will recall, back in July when we met, we were hoping to have had the fiberglass added in at that time, but it had been very difficult for us to get pricing and quotes and the cost estimates for fiberglass. So we postponed it, but the council decided that you really do want to have the fiberglass added in as an option, so David and his team pursued that with manufacturers or retailers. So we did get some quotes, and we felt like some good enough estimates to put them back in, and then when we publish the rules, have a pretty thorough assessment that this type of casing falls somewhere between the more expensive steel and the less expensive PVC. So it's really a consumer choice. There's no requirement to use that, but when we go over these rules, there'll be essentially everything we looked at in July with just the addition of the fiberglass. So just want to make sure that we all have that. And then I'm happy to go over each rule again like we did in July, if that's what you'd like me to do. Just a reminder, because it's been a few months since then. So these were rules based on a 4-year rule review, which by law, every agency is required to look at each set of rules they have every 4 years and decide if they're necessary and if we need to make any amendments to them or clean up or changes. So David and the compliance staff went through these rules, and then we also wanted to add in the fiberglass. So most of this, since there was no bill or legislative implementation, this is really just cleanup from internal staff, and then, of course, adding in the fiberglass. So I'll start with 76.10. Just as a reminder, for consistency and cleanup and efficiency, we took the definitions of plastic and steel and monitoring wells and put them into 76.100, where we believe that they are better suited. So that's really, we didn't make any other definition change. And if you have any questions as we go through, yes, sir.
This is Bill Lange.
Uh-huh.
I don't see anything about the PVC in
It says no change.
No change. If we didn't make any change to anything,
the where is it stated anywhere what kind of PVC to use?
it's already in 76.100. Let's see.
David Gunn, it's the NSF WC or water well casing with American Society of Testing, ASTM F480, schedule, SDR 26 approved well casing.
Or is it,
That's on the front page, it's scratched through, but like she said, we moved it to 76-100 under casing the well, where it fits better. It just doesn't show it on here because there was no change. It's always been that way.
It was in two places, basically.
Okay.
It was in the
I understand that,
definitions.
if it struck one out, where is it in the other place then?
It's already there.
Okay.
So if you want to turn to the rules under casing the well, plastic and steel and monitoring already existed there. So that's why there's no strikeouts or underlines here. We just simply added in the, when we get to 100, we're not there yet, but I'll
Okay.
show you. So all you see at 7610 is just the removal of those three items from the definitions. And then when we get to 7610, the only addition you're going to, 100, the only addition you're going to see is the fiberglass because we left steel and PVC alone. So, yeah. Should be, yeah.
You should have, David Gunn, you should have a full set of the rules in the back of your packet there, where you'll see that it's under there.
Yeah, and we'll get to that, and I'll
That's
show you,
fine.
yeah. But we did not remove or add anything to those definitions that were already in 76-100, except for adding the fiberglass. In 76-62, if you'll recall, we streamlined our process when staff receives an injurious water or constituents report. We changed it to within 45 days after receipt of the report, the department shall review the report for corrective actions taken by the driller, and then if we determine that there's been no corrective actions, the department, within 30 days of that, will notify the person in writing having the well drilled to inform them corrective action is needed and that the driller is required to plug, repair, or complete the well. We made this change because before it was requiring staff to notify everybody. And what we've discovered is in most of these reports, we discovered that the corrective action has been taken. And David, if you want to elaborate on any of that, you certainly can.
Mainly the change is due because we now have online reports, and we can just run a report now, and it'll tell me all of them that have indicated injurious water, and I can look through there and see if, they encountered injurious water from 130 to 150. Did they cement from 130 to 150? If so, we can just skip it and go on. That way we don't have to send a notice to everyone that indicates, like the old days when y'all had to submit an injurious water report separate from the well report. This is kind of updating it from that.
Okay, if no questions,
I have a question.
okay.
I don't, it's more of a clarification, not to change any rules, but it's on 76-100 on technical requirements for drilling the well. It's a question about commingling, and, I'm involved with drilling brackish wells, and I just want what the position is of the agency when, if someone were to go in and start looking at brackish well, would say it's, all the TDS values above 1,000, what can be commingled and what can't? For instance, would you allow, if they identified a zone that was 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams per liter TDS, could that mingle with a 5,000? I mean, these issues will be coming up, and I know some jobs that I'll be working with. I get different answers depending on who you talk to.
David Gunn, what the rules say now is commingling of two zones or aquifer that are chemically different.
Right.
So if it caused quality degradation to the other zone or aquifer, then it cannot be allowed. You would have to, say if you have one zone at 5,000 TDS and one zone at 2,100 TDS, then you'd have to probably drill 2 wells.
Is that the position of the board? I mean, because, that's going on now. Because there's no
That's
way-
always been the position of the department and the board, that you can't commingle 2 zones that are not chemically the same.
Some folks would consider that just brackish water, since that brackish is 1 to 10.
And you can produce brackish water, but you just got to seal it off from the other fresh water in the area.
Well, 2,000 is not fresh. So 2,000, I'm just taking as
Well-
an example, 2,000 and 5,000 is, I just don't know what the breaking point is. I think it's clear you can't mix portable water with non-portable water.
Right.
But when you start getting at different levels of TDS, what's acceptable? If it stays all within the brackish zone, is that okay, or what isn't?
We don't have a definition of brackish, but
Right.
we do go by the Texas Water Development Boards, and where they say from 1 to 1,000 is fresh,
Right.
1,000 to, and I'm doing this from memory.
It's 3,000.
3,000 is slightly saline,
Right.
and then above that is,
Okay, so those are the categories you would be breaking things into?
Right.
It's not explicit, so is there room for application for a variance for that?
sure.
So that's, there's many compounds that would,
The variance is allowed from anything from 76-100 to 76-105, 106, something like that. Any of the technical requirements, you can ask for a variance toward that.
appreciate that. Well, I know some GCDs are looking at trying to get a better definition. I'm involved with some cases now where they're trying to demonstrate where you're pulling from when you have these multi-screens wells, which can be hundreds of feet, and it's confusing right now. It's something there might be benefits to clarifying that in the future.
Okay.
Mary Winston, Mr. Young, we may be looking at, I see other faces, maybe a work group or some other discussion in the future. If it's not clear, yes, David said, definitely you can request a variance, but if you're seeing it in the field, it may vary if Mr. Ball feels necessary in the future to maybe develop a work group to further discuss this if it's an issue.
I think it will be becoming an issue more and more. Just for that to be considered, we appreciate it.
Okay, moving on to 76.70. We made just some clarification to the process when the driller shall send the well log, and we tracked the statutory language in our new rule update. It was sort of like the statute before, but we didn't want to alter what the statute said. So the new language is simply mirroring what you find in the law.
Brandon Barkus here. I do have one question going back to 76.62 in combination with 76.61, or 76.71, excuse me. Any chance that the wells that have been affected by Hurricane Harvey would fall under the requirements in injurious water constituents report, specifically in 76.71, which mentions that a report needs to be issued if the well itself is altered. So any particular well that was affected by Harvey that maybe needed to be disinfected or something else done to that well, would that be considered altering it for purposes of 76.71, which would necessitate the notification requirements of 76.62, which then would lead to potentially those wells being plugged, repaired, or completed under those standards.
It would seem so. I'll let David weigh in, but
altering a well is more if you go in and you put a liner in it, or change the way the well's made up, adding chemicals to it, or in this situation, it wouldn't come under the definition of altering the well. Contaminating the well, if, in the area down in the southeast there, where Harvey flooded some of the zones and stuff, but is that what you're asking about,
Yeah.
altering the well?
Exactly.
Altering the well would be something physically taking place. Removing casing, which doesn't happen often. The most time I see altering a well is putting a liner in it, most of the times that I see. Other than that, then they would have to plug it, if they modify it that much that it's no longer the same well, just to make sure that the groundwater is protected.
So do you see a lot of wells that have been affected by Harvey having to be plugged?
Actually, I haven't had many reports of that at all yet. I've had a few concerned landowners call about what to do about their well because it was covered in floodwaters. And we direct them, or I'll tell them over the phone how to disinfect their well, and we've been directing them to the website for disinfection. Plus, the local drillers are taking care of business down there too. So I ran into one situation where an elderly lady didn't know what to do, and so I called a local driller, actually a pump installer, and asked what they were doing for that area, and he happened to be the person that was her, she was his customer. So he went out there and helped her. So we try to direct people to the right sources and get them in the right direction for taking care of the problems.
Ray, wasn't that,
I'll-
David, wouldn't normally an alteration be considered something that you would have to file a subsequent change on the well log?
Right. You mean amend the report?
Yes.
Right. If you did something that actually changed the well itself, like putting a liner in it, you'd need to file a reconditioning report.
Normal repairs or disinfection
Are not
equipment
considered.
changes
Right.
or part of repair and maintenance, isn't it?
That's
As opposed
right.
to alteration.
Right.
Alteration would be physically changing.
Physically changing the makeup of the
original
well.
construction.
Okay, 7672, this was just a couple of technical changes. The statute says repairing and plugging, so we added back in repairing, which would mean, common language would mean to put in working order again. In B, we simply replaced the definition, it moved, because we've renumbered those definitions a few times, it's actually, monitoring well is 761035. And then on the next page, again, we added in the words repaired to track what the statute says. In 76-100, this is where we get into some of the technical requirements that we updated. B1, you'll see we added the 3 inches larger than the outside diameter of the casing. And then in 76-100 B2, we made some corrections and added the outside diameter of the casing, and then you should have gotten a handout today on one page that says 76-100 B2. We discovered that the sentences could have been made more clear, so we basically just updated 76.100 B2 to say, and I'll read it to you, A well that is cemented with positive displacement technique to a minimum of 100 feet to surface, or a well that is tremi-pressure filled to the depth of 100 feet to the surface, provided the annular space is 3 inches larger than the outside diameter of the casing, may encroach up to 5 feet of the adjacent property line. And that was to just make more clear that there are two types of wells, and that should be the adjacent property line, that are kind of the exception to the general rule that it's 50 feet from the property line. So if you're okay with this more updated language, that's what we'll use. Then in 76.100 C1, again, we just clarified the language. All wells shall be completed so that aquifers or zones containing waters that differ in chemical quality are not allowed to commingle in the casing, borehole annulus, or the filter pack, etc. And then on the next page, in D2, this is where we added in the fiberglass as a possible casing material approved. Only the following casing materials may be used for a water well. A says no change, and that's where the plastic was, so that's why there's nothing written there. We didn't have to renumber it, it just stayed A. And then steel casing, the new fiberglass definition, National Sanitation Foundation, 61 NSF 61, and American Society of Testing Material, D2996 approved filament wound fiberglass casing, glass fiber reinforced thermosetting resin pipe. And then D, the only change is we just renumbered it, relettered it to D. Mr. Lange, is that, do you
Yes, ma'am.
make more sense? Okay. And then in E, annular seal, we simply added again, the annular space to a minimum of 10 feet shall be 3 inches larger in diameter than the outside diameter of the casing, etc. In F4, at the bottom of that page, we simply added in just a little bit, took out some language to make it a little more clear. Instead of so as to prevent, we just left it to prevent. And then in H, on the following page, we no longer have some sort of description of properly disinfected in 76108, so we just took that language out, and we've, people who ask the question how to properly disinfect, we direct them to the website. Okay, in 76101, technical requirements, in C1, we took out the language that says it's a defense to prosecution for violation of this section that the driller reasonably was not aware of having encountered injurious water. Just to reiterate, taking out this language does not remove any defense that a driller may have. That defense is there in the statute. Understandably, we have always interpreted this to mean in 7671 that a driller has to become aware of the injurious water if some sort of allegation or of a violation is filed against them. We did not believe it's appropriate, and it's not appropriate to simply have stated defenses to prosecution under our rules in the rules. But just be aware that doesn't mean there's no more defenses to prosecution under this rule. So. Okay, and then 76105. B1, again, we added the cement filling shall be a minimum thickness of 3 inches larger than the outside diameter of the casing. And 76107 on the next page, just a technical clarification in H2, 4-inch. And then at the very last one, 76111, in the Memorandum of Understanding, and information about TDLR. We have changed some phone numbers. And that is concluding what the rules we propose to be filed later this week. Unless you have some changes or opposition to that, the plan would be they get filed Friday. They'll be published November 17th for 30-day public comment that would end December 17th. And then we bring the package back before you with any public comments. We're thinking maybe January. And Delhi, I think, has some days we could throw out for the next meeting. I think the commission probably, I don't know, they meet in early December, which we wouldn't make that meeting. But I don't know if they have any, when their next scheduled meeting is after that, hopefully February or something. So we're not under any statutory guideline or rule to get these rules adopted by a certain point, but we just need to get them done. Do you have any questions?
Any of the members have a question?
I have one, Steve Young. No questions on the current rules, but just in general, has the agency looked at the rules that we have and checked them against other rules from other states, just to see if there were some strength or differences and why they might exist? I have one case in particular. I know I thought maybe about a year ago I was looking through the rules. I had a case where there was some wells corroded because of some galvanic action. Someone had put some bowls too close to the casing. And I know some other states had minimum spacing requirements just to prevent that from happening. And I don't know if we had one or not. It's just a general question of whether or not there's been sort of check on that.
David Gunn, I've contacted other states, talked to them, especially during the fiberglass.
Yeah.
Looking up, talked to them about their rules. I access their websites, and I compare some things, but to actually sit down and do it verbatim with each state, no, I haven't done that.
This is Della Lindquist. About 5 years ago, we did a fairly major overhaul of these rules. We had work groups in 2012 when the 4-year rule review was up, and we put them in a little, we felt like more order that flowed, how to construct the well in a little different order and kind of organize them. And during that time, we took a pretty hard look. We got lots of comments, lots. And we took a pretty hard look at what it said. Was it thorough? Did it accomplish what we needed? We parsed out some unnecessary language. Not to say that it can't happen again, but that was the last time I think we took a really in-depth look at every section, especially the technical stuff. So at any time they can be reopened. Normally what we do is there's the 4-year, which wouldn't be again until 2020, or if a bill passes in the maybe next session in 2019. But if there's something fundamentally that needs to be addressed or becomes urgent, I mean, we can always talk about
I don't think it's anything urgent. It was just a question. I certainly haven't gone through all the other rules at all either. Thank you for your time.
This is Ray Wisnett. I had a question. This is more curiosity, and it's a little embarrassing because I haven't been to a continuing education course in probably 7 years since I haven't renewed my license as an active license. But do we have any continuing education courses that highlight on or give any background to the use of conductivity meters?
Not that, David Gunn, not that I can think of. I would have to look at them. I don't really keep a close eye on the continuing education part because that actually goes over to the education and exam division. But I can't think of any on top of my head right now. I'm going to look into it and check.
What brought this to my attention was the fact that if we approve and go forward with the changes recommended, if a driller doesn't have as a point of defense the consideration of being able to provide that he didn't contact injurious water, that might be a very simple way to tell what the general characteristics of the water are as you're drilling a water well. As a former owner, we had conductivity measures on all of our rigs. All of my drillers knew how to use them. So I don't know if that speaks anything to some of the questions.
It's one of the issues.
Yeah. Well, and here again, it was just a question. So.
Well, and this is Della again. The thought has, as we were going through this, in legal terms, there's different states of knowledge, and so this is a rather strict one. So if a driller got up and just said, I didn't know this was injurious water, it becomes very difficult for the enforcement team to get in someone's head and say, yes, you did. And so there's a different legal standard, like should have known. You should have known. And then the enforcement people can bring in all the ways you may analyze, you've drilled wells for 100 years in this place. It's always been injurious here. It smells or it looks a certain way. And that opens that door to bring that in. So there's an argument, could be an argument that you're protecting groundwater more if you lessen that standard. It's not a conversation for today. But the standard historically has been you have to be actually aware instead of should have known, which is a little bit less of a, so.
I do feel, Ray Wisnian, I do feel there's a little bit of a relationship between protecting groundwater and a competent driller protecting his customer he's going to be helping provide groundwater. So that was the only reason I asked the question. So.
David, this is Rusty Gilmore. Is there any other red flags other than the declaration on the drilling log that you have encountered or if you knowingly encountered some dangers? Is there any other red flags that your agency or your people might look at that's saying, hey, listen, we need to go back and revisit that if something could be a problem there as far as commingling some aquifers? The reason I'm asking that is because the declaration is there, and the driller, I don't know how many drillers test those waters as they go through there, if they test them at all. Is there any other red flags there saying, like the physical log, you look at it and you see that, just like for instance in the Texas Panhandle, probably 90% of the wells were drilled to the Permian red bed at 500, and I'm just throwing out a number, 500 and something feet. Then all of a sudden you start getting these logs in there that have gone through 1,000 foot of red bed and then drilling back into some different pay. Is there some reason that water probably is 4, 5, 6 million years older than that above, that there's something that may need to be tested there? Or what I'm getting is there some red flags there say, we're not going to listen to that declaration there, this guy checked it off, well, I didn't knowingly did that. I guess maybe getting back to where Ray's talking about, there's nothing there that would require somebody to test that if they're, say, changing up the depth of that aquifer or changing up the depth of the standard of drilling in that aquifer.
No, David Gunn, no. We basically, go by complaints. If we get a complaint, then we investigate it and see if there was any commingling going on by testing the waters and all that, doing our investigation, looking at other logs in the area and all that. So, there's no other red flags for it, unless the driller tells us. And if the driller tells us, then we look that they sealed the well properly during that, when they encountered that injurious water. Other than that, if we get a complaint about it, then we go through that investigative techniques to find out whether they actually commingled or not by doing the testing and investigation.
Thank you, David.
No problem.
Okay, well, if you don't have any further questions, what I ask you to do is move to recommend that these proposed rules with the technical clarifications that we went over today, that they be published for notice and comment, and then we'll take it up once the comment period has closed.
Brandon Barkus, I do have one quick question which may or may not lead to a suggested change. On 76.72E, the question is whether or not an abandoned well can be repaired.
Mhm.
And, I mean, can an abandoned well be repaired?
It can.
Okay. It looks like to me, and this is just the lawyer in me, so to speak, I guess, but the second sentence there, it says, an abandoned well must be either capped or plugged. I think possibly it looks like it precludes the ability to repair an abandoned well, even though it says must. Because I noticed there in the third sentence, it looks like if a landowner person who possesses an abandoned, just take out deteriorated well, fails to have the well plugged, capped, or repaired, like you've added.
I understand, I see exactly what you're saying. Will you allow us to, when we're adjourned here today, I'll go back and reread the statute. We wanted to track where they had used the words repaired exactly in the statute and in the rules. So we could make that correction, because instead of must, it might be may, so. And then we'll make the correction, but thank you for pointing that out.
And actually, I kind of misspoke. A deteriorated well can be repaired. An abandoned well, I'd have to look at the definition and at the well on a case-by-case basis, really, because a deteriorated well can be repaired. Abandoned well, is it past the point where it can't be repaired? There's a possibility. So let me look into that.
Thank you.
Can we entertain a motion before you make the changes? Or do they have to be specifically written in?
You can just,
Be qualified in the motion.
Well,
yeah.
This is Ray Reed. I got, I guess maybe going back to your question a little bit, where it says abandoned well, I guess that's going to mean if the well, if a landowner just moved away and left the well, which would be one form of abandonment. But if the well has already been abandoned by a licensed driller, in other words, plugged, then it cannot be repaired.
That makes sense.
Hope that helps some.
And I might as well just go through the statute right now. I'm looking at 1901-255 in the code. Abandoned means a well that's not in use, so it could be deteriorated. It's just not in use. So the law says, a driller who knows of an abandoned or deteriorated well shall notify the landowner that the well must be plugged or capped to avoid injury or pollution. So right now, the statute just says plugged or capped. Abandoned or deteriorated well shall notify the landowner that the well must be plugged or capped to avoid injury or pollution. Repaired seems to be for when you encounter injurious water. A driller shall notify the department and the landowner or person having the well drilled on encountering injurious water and determining that the well must be plugged, repaired, or properly completed. So it does look like for abandoned and deteriorated, it's going to be plugged or capped, according to statute. So we can make that correction and take repair out of the plugged, out of the abandoned or deteriorated. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
And we will entertain a motion, and in that motion, specify that changes will be made.
Yes, in your motion, you want to recommend publication of the rules with the technical corrections to 76.72E, as well as 76-100B2.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Wizenhut, second by Mr. Reed. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? There are none opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience and coming back to address the whole thing again, but we now have the fiberglass in there, or we will, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
We had discussion of the types of education programs offered by TDLR for the water well drillers program. Board have any discussion or?
Mary Winston, TDLR, I believe this was a request. Kim Witt, if you would come to the podium. And because the item is written discussion, and this was a request, am I correct, Kim?
I believe so. Kim Well with Education Examination Division.
I believe it was a board member who
Who requested.
requested this
Okay.
discussion.
And we have a discussion and whatever our fellow members have to discuss, but any further action would have to be put forth to the next meeting just because we haven't noticed it, so.
Okay. First, does any of you want to have any questions as to why you wanted to request this? Or would you like me just to share with you the process of what a course goes through for approval? All right.
If
Let
nothing
me
else, maybe
just,
more- As much for our members of the
New members?
advisory council that
Sure.
aren't, have been here as long as we are.
I don't know how much you've looked on the website, but on the website, we do have a listing of all the CE providers that have been approved. And as you go through those CE providers, it will also list out all the courses that have been approved. The courses do go through an approval process. The provider submits an application, and we review a timed outline as well as the content material to make sure that it meets the requirements of 76.25. There are specific technical topics that can be covered, laws and rules, several different things that would be helpful to the industry. We make sure that it meets those requirements, and then if there are any specific technical requirements that we are uncertain about, then we refer those to David, and he reviews those and helps us to make sure that they meet those standards. Then once they're approved for 1 year. A CE provider can submit any course material as long as it falls under those requirements defined in 76.25.
Mary Winston, one more time. In the back of your materials, we have a list. It says continuing education for water well drillers and pump installers, and we do have an extensive list in the back with some of the things that.
Okay. I believe I gave that to you last month, so it would be current within about 20 to 30 days. But that's kind of a snapshot of a picture of what the courses go through for the approval process. Also, in the statistics, you were shown how many courses we have approved at this time, and that information is listed there as well.
It's Bill Lange.
Uh-huh.
How do y'all keep track of the online providers? Or
As-
how do they keep track of who's taking it, or
Okay,
who's
that's a
listening
good
to it?
question. All of our providers are assigned a unique ID number, and we actually have an online system where they report all of those completions. That includes the online providers and the classroom providers. So when a course is completed, it's the responsibility of that provider to then submit the completion of those hours.
How do you know the driller himself is taking it, or his secretary?
The courses are required to have verification questions within the course. The course is also required to be timed, and sometime within the year approval process, we will go in and audit that course and make sure that they're still following what they submitted for approval.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
If not, thank you.
All right, I hope that information was helpful.
Recommendation for agenda items for next council meeting.
I would like to, Steve Young, maybe suggest the work group on the commingling issue, to get that clarified.
All right.
On this, Bill Lange, on the coal mingling issue, is the saltwater production under Railroad Commission, or is it under TDLR?
Salt water, what do you mean by
Well,
salt
I
water?
mean brackish,
It
there's so
should-
much brackish water used.
Anything under 10,000 would be, it would be Railroad Commission. Under that would be us, should be, I understand.
Well, I didn't know there was a,
I think that,
a line there.
I think that, I'm not too sure, that's UIC. Underground injection control said anything less than 10,000 is considered usable water. So then that's what it's unclear, but I believe that's what the GCD should be stewardships for. But there is a lot of ambiguity out there. It's part of the issue, but producing above 1,000 is common in Texas. Very common.
Yeah.
And that's not considered portable.
And for
So-
clarification, for next meeting, Mary Winston, at next meeting, we will actually be appointing, Mr. Ball will be appointing the work group. So, yes.
Okay, discussion of time and location of next council meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we have a couple of dates we wanted to run past you. One is Thursday, January 4th, or Friday, January 5th, both at 1 p.m.
I guess you'll be sending out something out to the members, try to make sure that you,
Delia, Mary Winston Delia will be sending out something to try
Make
to
sure we have
capture
quorum.
you. We actually set another advisory board meeting on the 3rd, and my joke then was everyone should have been finished celebrating New Year's, so we're pulling it in a little close, but if we can kind of get this done, it would be great, because Della, the comment period will have passed for rules, and it would be a good time for you to meet.
It would have to be the 4th for me.
We can-
so are we saying 3rd, 4th, or 5th?
4th or 5th?
fourth or fifth.
No, it doesn't matter, actually, either day.
Either day works for me.
Okay.
Anyone have an objection to any of those days?
That's just the latest, the better. That's, That's so close to the holidays. I would go with the latest date.
Gonna be sober with that?
I'm hoping not to be at work, but it ain't gonna happen.
The latest?
Can we-
This is Della Lindquist. There's no requirement that it has to be then. I just,
Thursday or
the
Friday?
rules will have been closed, the 30-day public comment will have been closed on December 17th. I need at least 2 weeks to compile the comments and get everything ready to bring back before you. I don't know when the commission is going to meet again after we have a December 15th meeting. I don't know when. I don't know if they're going to meet in February or when. So I'm under no deadline if you wanted to push it later into January. I just needed at least 2 weeks from the 17th of December to get the comments, if any, together to bring back before you, so.
Lonnie Ball, one of the main things I think we would need to keep an eye on would be the weather around that time. There's a possibility of a norther that prevent members being able to get here. But if it's got to be before February,
Let's
just have to take our
try to,
chances.
let's try to make it before February.
Yes.
We are bringing on the newer programs, the newest programs, starting Wednesday. So we'll be stacking a lot of meetings. We want to get you guys in before you're bumped by something else. But if the weather starts to get crazy, that is a consideration. And this is early enough for us to have a little wiggle room.
Right.
We did have some later dates in January, if
Friday,
possible.
January 12th, or Thursday, January 25th.
So we have a water well convention sometime in January. You know what dates?
24th, it's 24th, 26th.
Okay. Well,
Unless you wanted to combine it with the convention.
What day does that fall on?
Is it here?
20.
Where's the convention?
San Marcos?
San Marcos. Close. You're the board.
Oh, we can meet over there?
We've done it before.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have done it before.
Good, publish.
Yeah.
What are we thinking? Delia's over here saying the 30th as well, Tuesday the 30th.
I would only suggest, this is Ray Wisden, I would only suggest that if you decide to have it on the 25th, you probably are allow a little more time for it than you did today, so.
As the convention.
How do the board members feel about it? Do we want to just go with the 4th and the 5th, or 4th and/or the 5th? And if it works, it works. If it-
I see a nod or two, but I'm not hearing anything.
4th or 5th for me.
Okay.
4th or 5th for me.
Okay.
If we go with the 4th or 5th, how about the 5th? The late, I'm with you, the later the better.
All right.
Vote for the 5th.
Mr. Ball? 5th. Tentatively for January 5th, 2018.
Were- These 2 emails that were in the package are handed out to us. Is that something just informational? This is Lonnie Ball. Or is that just for our information, or is it something we needed to talk about?
Was that the public comment from before?
Yeah.
I'm happy to go over that with you. We did it at the first, we did it at in July. to basically say that those were the two public comments that came in. As a result of those comments, we did not make any changes to the rules. In our preamble, when we publish the rules later this week, we address our response to those public comments, and we'll tell them why we didn't make any changes as based on the 2-year issue that the one gentleman had, and then the fast bailer issue.
Okay. Thank you. That's all. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Reed, seconded by Mr. Gilmore. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. We are adjourned.